Is your Philippine passport expiring, about to expire, or already expired? Well, there's no judging there because right now we are in a situation wherein things that we should have done or things that we are planning to do cannot be done for obvious reasons. The latest data that I got is that there are around 3,000 Filipinos living or working here in India. And for sure, you or anybody you know may have had some issues regarding their passport. And by that, I mean, renewing it or, asking for an extension so that, they can remain here in India. In this episode of Filipindian Tales, I will let you in on some of these issues and how these can be addressed or handled, and I'll also share my experience on how I went through the process. Hello once again, and welcome to another episode of Filipindian Tales, where we give you narratives of life and living the Filipindian way. My name is Gemmarie Tibayan Venkataramani, and I'm talking to you from this beautiful city of Chennai here in South India. So yeah, you are a Filipino settled here in India and your passport is expiring. Well, this would have been a usual case, like, our passport expires every 5 years and we have to renew them. But then, the usual is no longer usual, and the normal that we are so used to is not what is happening right now. As a foreigner in this country, it is important that we keep all our documents in good shape or in proper order. Our passport, visa, and in most of our cases, our OCI card, which is our permission to remain, live, and even work here in India. Everything has to be in proper order at all times. But as I've said earlier, things that are normally in order are difficult to maintain as it is. There may be some problems, issues, and delays that we may face along the way. In this episode, we will basically be talking about the issues of passport renewal or extension for the Filipinos living here in India. See, our country, the Philippines, do not have an embassy here in Chennai or in South India for that matter. We only have a consulate which is run by an honorary consulate, and their services for the Filipinos and those who may want to visit the Philippines are very limited, especially during this time of the pandemic. Philippine consulates can also be found in Mumbai, Kolkata, and Nepal. Nepal is of course another country, but because of its proximity to India and maybe because it's also not a very big country, it has been put under the guidance and the supervision of the Philippine Embassy in New Delhi. The Philippine Embassy here in India is located in New Delhi, the capital, which is about 2,174 kilometers from Chennai, where I am at right now, and travel time takes about 2 hours and 45 minutes by flight and 35 hours by train, which is more or less 1 day and a half. Suffice it to say that it's not easy to get to Delhi, especially for us who are living, here in South India, because Delhi is in the north and we are in the south, so it's like the opposite poles. And it's also, distance-wise, it is really quite a distance. So we were really grateful that in the last few years, the people of the embassy, the Philippine Embassy in New Delhi, specifically the consular section, usually conducts mission and caravans to serve the Filipinos all over the country. So they go to different, key cities, major cities, to answer the questions or queries or whatever consular needs, say passport renewal or whatever documentation that they need from the embassy. So that way we don't need to go to the embassy, we don't need to go to Delhi every time we need something from them. They used to come to us. And this they used to do in turns, like they come to Chennai to serve the people, the Filipinos who are living in Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry. And of course, they also go to Kerala for those who are living in that state, and in Bangalore for those who are in the Karnataka region, in Bombay for the Maharashtra region, and of course Hyderabad for the Telangana and Andhra Pradesh region. And I think Bombay also, they cover Goa and the other parts of, you know, Maharashtra. And of course they go to Calcutta to serve those eastern states. And those who are closer to Delhi, maybe, you know, they go to Delhi. And once in a while, they also go to Nepal, because I think there are also a few Filipinos living there. So that way, it was very easy for us, you know, whenever we want to renew our visa or, you know, do all other documentation that we need from the embassy. It's quite ideal, if I may say so, because, you know, living so far away from your country, living in another country like India, it feels good to be, you know, checked once in a while by your people from the embassy, or makumusta, as we would say that. Apart from getting the services that we require from the embassy, it's also nice to once in a while, you know, get to meet the ambassador, get to meet the people who are working in the embassy, and that will also be the time when, you know, other Filipinos get together and get to know who are all, you know, living very close to each other. And so that becomes a really nice venue or occasion for us to know that, you know, we are not alone here in India, that, you know, we have a lot of kababayans. And I'm sure all of you will agree with me that it's always nice that once in a while you get to talk in your own language and maybe even partake on some of the food that, you know, they usually bring. But as I said in the beginning of this video, we are in an unusual situation and things don't happen the usual way. For almost 2 years now, the Philippine Embassy has not conducted any mission or caravan here in Chennai or in any other parts of the country for that matter, all because of the pandemic. So what do we Filipinos do if our passport is expiring, about to expire, or already expired? Two solutions. Either we get it extended or we have it renewed. Extension is an easier deal because it doesn't require any personal appearance in the embassy, which means we don't really need to go to the embassy if we want to extend our passport. According to the recent advisory from the Philippine Embassy, passport extension is done only through courier services. Basically, the person sends his or her filled up form and then the passport and a fee of 1,580 in the form of demand draft to the embassy at this address. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of a passport extension? If you ask me, this is the fastest, easiest, and cheapest way. That's a big advantage, isn't it? The only thing you have to do is fill up the form, get a demand draft, and together with the passport, send all of them to the embassy in New Delhi. Cost-wise, I would say that apart from the extension fee of 1,580 rupees in the form of the demand draft, other costs that you may incur would be the courier charges, which may be around 300 rupees, and the return postage that they actually require so that, you know, they can send your passport back to you would cost around 100 rupees, and I think that's it. In less than 2,000 rupees, you get to have your passport extended. And it's also quite fast because the turnaround for passport extension is a maximum of 2 weeks. And that's also just because of the delay that may happen in the postal services. Now we go to the drawback or the disadvantage of just extending your passport. Our Philippine passports can only be extended for a period of 1 year, after which we have to necessarily renew them again. According to the officer I spoke to in the embassy, passport extensions is mainly for emergency purposes and for those who have to urgently travel back to the Philippines. So now we go to the renewal process, which is ideally what should be done if and when possible. But of course, there are things that needs to be considered when deciding on this process. Passport renewal needs personal appearance, which means that you have to actually present yourself to the embassy while renewing your passport. If you are residing in Delhi or nearby towns or cities, lucky you, because that means you just have to travel to the embassy, maybe by cab or taxi or any other means of transportation, and that's it, you get to have your passport renewed. But if you happen to live elsewhere in India, it may cost you a lot more money. India is such a big country, and traveling from one state to another may prove a little costly. I recently renewed my passport, and I will be sharing how I went through the process in the hope that I could help some kababayans who are also contemplating on going through the same thing. First step is to book my appointment with the embassy. The advisory issued by the Philippine Embassy on 23rd of June 2021 strictly says that there are no walk-ins allowed for passport renewal. And that means we have to book our appointment 7 working days prior to the appointment date. So I did just that. And to seek an appointment, I had to send an email to this email address. A confirmation of my appointment was sent to me by email, and I had to make a printout of that because that is necessary, that is required before you could enter the embassy. The guard actually checks them, and just to prove that you actually have an appointment before they allow you inside the embassy. Second is taking the demand draft for the amount required. The passport renewal fee is 4,740 rupees, payable to the Embassy of the Philippines in New Delhi. For those who may be asking what is a demand draft, because in the Philippines we don't have such a thing, a demand draft is nothing but a banking instrument issued by any bank against your payment towards a specific purpose and payee. With the demand draft, we also got 100 rupees worth of postage stamp and the return envelope that would be used by the embassy people, the consular people, to send your passport back to you. Okay. The third thing is booking our flight. So now that we have an appointment and we have the demand draft ready and the postage stamps and everything, we now have to book our flight. As I have mentioned earlier, New Delhi is almost at the other end of the country, and that meant a 2 hour and 45 minutes to 3 hours flight both ways. Well, the cost varies and the timing can be terrible. Since air traffic is very low, as we all know, it's the pandemic and not many people actually travel at this time, so most of the flights don't usually go direct to its destination, and most of the flights that I found while booking our flight to New Delhi are hopping flights, which means that before reaching the destination, which in this case is New Delhi, they hop onto a couple of cities or major airports to get some more passengers before reaching the destinations. There are a few flights, but as I've said earlier, the timings can be awful. But because of safety reasons, we decided that, however awful the timing may be, we wanted to take a direct flight to Delhi. And the flight that we got actually left really, really early in the morning, and the return flight is also quite late in the night. And another thing is that, because of the pandemic, it is advisable that, we reach the airport much ahead of our flight time, because there may be new protocols or new procedures that we may have to follow before we can be allowed to check in or even board our flight. So we were there 2 hours ahead of time, and we had to go through all the necessary protocols that the airport actually imposed during this time whenever we want to travel. So we got the flight, and the cost, if you would like to know, for me and my husband, both ways, we paid around 30,000 rupees. Then next comes the RT-PCR test, which is another health safety protocols required by the embassy. This test has to be taken 48 hours prior to your appointment time. And so, you have to think backwards from your appointment time and have your test taken at that particular time. This again, the certification or the result of your RT-PCR test is required the minute you land in the embassy, and again, the guard will not allow you to enter if you have not shown him the result, the negative result of your RT-PCR test. And again, the cost is 1,500 rupees per person, so 3,000 for both me and my husband. So yeah, we got our flight quite early, and obviously we landed in New Delhi much earlier than our appointed time. And what I did was that the minute we landed, I phoned the embassy. I asked them, you know, if we can be accommodated much earlier than our appointed time, and they said no problem, you can come. And so we head to the taxi stand to get our taxi to go to the embassy. Well, one tip here that I want to give our kababayans who intend to visit the embassy for whatever purposes that you may have, like, you know, renewal of your passport and any other things, is never book your taxi from inside the airport. And not even those taxi services line just outside, you know, in the line where there are a lot of eateries there, not even there. So what you should do is come out of the airport onto those taxi lines waiting outside and look for the government taxi service outside. There is a booth there where you will be charged 1/4 of what those taxi services inside the airport would have charged you. And while booking your taxi, make a note of the embassy's address, which is again here. And the taxi fare we paid from the airport to the embassy is 350 rupees. Can you imagine that? The first one I asked inside the airport was charging me 1,500 rupees. That's a lot of savings, right? Well, travel time from the airport to the embassy is just around 15 minutes and maybe max of 20 minutes if there is heavy traffic. So yeah, now we have reached the embassy, and the first thing we did was to present our appointment letter to the guard, and for him to check that we actually have an appointment on that particular day. And as I said earlier, we actually came much earlier than our appointed time, but then we told him that, you know, we already called them and that, you know, they have asked us to come early. And another thing is that, you know, we have to present our RT-PCR test result, the negative test result, and he will also check that, and then he allowed us to enter the consulate services area of the embassy. So yeah, now we were ushered inside the consulate services waiting area, where I saw another Filipina who was also there to do some work. I actually don't know what work she was there for, but then yeah, the minute we arrived there, we were asked, or I was asked, to fill up a form. The form is very simple. It's, you know, the basic details that they require for the passport renewal. And then after submitting the form, you know, we were allowed to go inside the office where they took our photo and the biometrics. The whole process took less than 15 minutes. And before we knew it, we were on our way back to the airport. How was my experience, you may ask? Well, I'd say it's a little better than our experience 5 years ago when we also went to the embassy to have our passport renewed. At that time, I was with, of course, my husband and my daughter, whose passport also needed the renewal. At that time, we went through some very unfortunate situations, and I'd say that, you know, this is a lot better than that experience. This time it's very matter of fact. In fact, I didn't even feel that I'm in my country's embassy, except for those few minutes when, you know, the consular officers are talking among themselves in Filipino. Otherwise, it is just like transacting business in any Indian government office. Before leaving the consular office, I asked the officer how long will it take for me to get my new passport. And she said it will take a maximum of 3 weeks. And true enough, in 23 days, I got my new passport delivered to me by post. So yeah, I guess the biggest advantage of renewing the passport over simply extending it is the validity. See, right now, the validity of a Philippine passport is 10 years, which means that in the next 10 years, we don't need to worry about renewing our passport again. Biggest drawback, I would say, is of course the cost. You know, from the passport renewal fee, to the RT-PCR test, to the flight ticket, and then the taxi fare, food, and other things that you may need while traveling. It's quite costly. It's quite a costly affair. And in total, I'd say that between me and my husband, we would have spent around 50,000 rupees. But then we got to do what we got to do. And as I've said earlier, as foreigners in this country, we always have to keep our documents in good shape and in good form. Well, I sincerely hope that this video has helped shed light to some of your questions, queries, or doubts regarding the passport renewal, Philippine passport renewal here in India. And together, let us hope and pray that this pandemic ends soon, and that, you know, we get to some form of normalcy in our lives as Filipinos here in India. If you have any queries or questions regarding the process of passport renewal in the Philippine Embassy in New Delhi, please feel free to comment down below or send me an email in the email listed in the description box of this video, and I will gladly answer whatever question you have in the best of my ability. Maraming salamat po, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel for more updates, more news, more information about life and living the Filipindian way. Before I end, let us all remember that the pandemic is not over yet, and we haven't defeated the virus yet. Please keep yourself and your family safe. Bye for now.